It's a pleasure to take a call on the second reading of the Advanced Technology Institute Bill, and in doing so I just want to cover off a couple of issues that the other members have raised in their speeches. Effectively of interest is the submission from Business New Zealand, where they quoted that we firmly advocate that the ATI needs to have operational R&D capability in order to have credibility and skin in the game. That's a very relevant comment, because when we look at it, what the ATI will be is a business-led, market-focused research institute, and it needs to be successful. There's always been a gap in the market, and we have known it for a long time, that we do need a business-focused research institute. And when you look at the genesis of this bill, it didn't only come from a government agenda of innovation and economic growth. One only has to research the situation. The genesis came from also the Empowering Innovation Conference. One only has to read that document to understand how in sync with business this government is. And I just have to make that point, because there is a history of a gap in the market, and the ATI is designed to achieve this. There were those comments that were raised on the other side of the House of lack of accountability. For goodness sake, inside this bill, Mr. Speaker, it prescribes how that transparency will be brought to this House. The Auditor General will annually audit the process. It will be very transparent. As regards to the argument from the other side of the House of the confusion and confliction between the funder-provider split, this is part of the efficiency that we also saw when we brought together the New Zealand Transport Authority, which was something Labor did. So some of the arguments we're hearing is about a trip back to the 19th century. This is a bill that has its day in the 21st century. I have great pleasure in supporting the bill.
Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. I stand to speak on the Advanced Technology Institute Bill, and I'd just like to remind the House that New Zealand First was actually the only party that opposed this bill at its first reading on the grounds that this work was already being done. And I'm pleased to stand here and say we were right, and we were proven right just about by every submitter that came to see us. And we're very pleased with the work that the Select Committee has done. Very tight timeframes. Would have liked to have more opportunity from the government to really flesh this out and to have a greater input from the industry itself. But the submissions we did get were valid, they were in depth, they were well thought out, and I appreciated the level of expertise that was brought by the submitters to this topic in the very short time frame that we had. There was a lot of work done around the word collaboration. A lot of work done, a lot of talk and discussion around the role of the ATI and making sure that it did not duplicate, that it did not compete with people currently doing the research work and currently inside this environment. However, those submitters that were doing this work, while they were very concerned that contestable funding was not, another competitor wasn't put into the contestable research funding market, and that there wasn't a duplication of expense and a duplication of work done, they did acknowledge the need for an organisation that was aware of all the players in that area, so that people could be connected. And I think that's what, if I recall correctly, one of the conversations we had at Select Committee was that 80% of the ATI's role is actually going to be about connecting people. 80% of ATI's role is about the relationship between business, the researchers, and bringing those organisations together appropriately to take a product from a certain place and to be able to commercialise it. I am going to take this opportunity, however, while the Honourable David Carter is here, to talk about the fact that there still is a bit of a gap here, and I hope that the other 20% that we have talked about, we don't know how much money will be dedicated or what budget line will be given to this 20%, which is the research itself that the ATI will be looking at undertaking. because that information is not available to us yet. But there is a bit of a concern I still have when I hear the Honourable David Carter speak and Colin King talk, that we're still talking about widgets and gadgets that have been produced, and this is just about looking at them, figuring out a way to improve and going on to commercialising that market. And I see Mr King shaking his head, and that's a good thing. I'm pleased to see that. We've now got that on the Hansard. That's great. Because, for example, on the 30th of October, I was with the Taipei Cultural and Commerce Office representative and the Consul General of Japan and the Deputy Consul General of Japan at Maharangi Technical Institute in Warkworth. And they have taken eels from eggs. They can take 2 million eel eggs, get 2 million live births, and they can keep those eels alive for 12 days. But they now need $3 million to take from 12 days to mass production. And that market, if we can get that investment from this government, I don't know whether that's something the ATI would be able to use part of that 20% to invest in. It's not yet commercialised. But should that industry be commercialised, should that technology, that investment be made, that would be bigger than oyster farming, bigger than mussel farming. That is an industry that this country could really lift off on. But when we don't have an organisation that can invest in that way, we leave those people vulnerable to having to sell their IP overseas. And that IP goes overseas and it stays overseas. So I'm hoping that part of what we're trying to create here is that the 20% that the ATI will actually be using for research investment will be in those sort of areas, definitely not to compete with other researchers and other business organisations that are working well but just need linkages. Now, there was another point that New Zealand First tried to have in our minority report, and it was a very small thing. It was a single word. It was a single word that we were hoping to have inserted into clause 14.1b. Clause 14.1b reads, in meeting its main objective and performing its functions, ATI must proactively engage and collaborate with businesses, other RS&T providers and other persons that ATI considers relevant to the performance of its functions. All we asked for was the word identify. We asked for the word identify to be inserted after the word proactively and before the word engage. So it would read proactively identify, engage and collaborate. And it may seem very small, but the point of inserting that word was that one of the things the ATI must do is first of all find out who's in the market so that they can then go and engage and collaborate, so that it takes away the excuse should they enter into competition with anybody currently in the market that they didn't know they were there. It's a very small thing, but a very practical thing to make sure that people do know who's in that market, that ATI does not enter into competition with people who are providing this service already. There's another little concern that I have. I voiced it at the time. It's around the food bowl of Auckland. The food bowl is going to be absorbed. That may not be the appropriate word, but it's going to become part of the ATI. The food bowl was partially funded by the ratepayers of Auckland, and it's about to be absorbed. I would suggest that there is some compensation that needs to be paid to the ratepayers of Auckland while they lose this asset. And if the government benches would like to know the amount of money that has been invested by the ratepayers of Auckland into the food bowl, then they can contact my office and I will have that amount sent to them. So we opposed this bill to start with. New Zealand First will now be supporting this bill. We support it because we have been listened to. The submitters have supported our original concerns around this bill. We believe that the work done by the Select Committee has been adequate and strong for the time frame that it's been given. We will be watching the ATI just to watch that it does not compete for contestable funding. We will be seeking support for Maharangi Technical Institute and the EEL project. And if there was anything extra, there's a whitebait project there that could actually do with a bit of an input as well. So just in closing, we would like to thank the Select Committee, all members of the Select Committee, for what was a collaborative process, and we will be supporting this bill.
Scott Simpson.
Mr Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise in support in the second reading of this Advanced Technology Institute bill, and I'd like to join with